It started with a siren that shouldn't have been there. I was working on the split-rail fence along the edge of our ranch when I saw two patrol cars crunching up the gravel drive. Lights flashing as if there had been a bank robbery instead of a quiet morning with birdsong and the lowing of cattle. And behind those flashing lights came a familiar SUV. Pearl white with HOA decals slapped onto the bumper like it was some kind of government seal. Out waddled Karen, the HOA president who had made it her life's mission to control what she did not own. She was red-faced with fury, her clipboard tucked under one arm. And before the officers could even step out fully, she jabbed her finger at my wife. That woman is blocking the road. She's threatening the community and refusing access. Arrest her. My wife, Elena, stood calm as the sunrise. She was leaning casually against the gate, her dark uniform shirt tucked neatly, her badge gleaming against her chest. The officers froze mid-step as their eyes landed on it. They glanced at each other, unsure if they had heard Karen correctly. She was still shrieking about bylaws, claiming the road beyond the gate was community property, and yelling that Elena had no authority to stop anyone from passing. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh, but anger boiled hotter in my chest. She had gone too far this time. I stepped forward, wiping dust from my palms. Karen, you know damn well this is private land. That road goes straight into our ranch. You've been told 100 times. She flared her nostrils, clutching her clipboard as if it were a sword. Don't lie. The HOA board voted and declared this road an access point for our community walking trails. No one has the right to block it. And certainly not her. Her voice cracked with venom on the word her, spitting it like a curse. The younger officer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Ma'am, I think there might be a misunderstanding, but Karen bulldozed over him. No misunderstanding. I am reporting her for obstruction and harassment. Do your job and cuff her right now. The two officers looked at Elena again. They looked at the badge on her chest, at the radio on her shoulder, at the confident stillness in her eyes. One of them swallowed hard. Chief, is this true? Elena didn't even move from the gate. She spoke with the steady authority of someone who had worn the uniform for 25 years. This is my property. This gate is lawfully installed. And this woman, she gestured toward Karen without even raising her voice, is trespassing, making false reports, and interfering with an officer in the line of duty. The silence that followed was a thunderclap. The realization sank in like cold water down Karen's back. She had called the cops on the police chief. She had demanded that officers arrest their own superior for standing on her own land. For a flicker of a moment, her jaw fell open, her face blanching pale. Then, desperate, she tried to regain ground. That's abuse of power. She's using her position to bully us. You can't just claim everything is yours. But her voice cracked. The officers didn't move to cuff Elena. They didn't even look at me. They looked at Karen like a child who had just cursed in church. And then came the twist. Another vehicle rolled up. This one a black county SUV with tinted windows. Out stepped Sheriff Daniels. Tall, gray-haired, a man whose presence alone steadied the air. He had heard the radio chatter and come to see for himself. He took one long look at Elena, nodded respectfully, then turned his gaze on Karen. What's the problem here? He asked. Karen rushed forward like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. Sheriff, thank God you're here. They're abusing authority, blocking HOA property, threatening me. Her voice pitched higher with each accusation, shrill and wild. Daniels raised an eyebrow, then turned to Elena. She simply handed him a folded map. County seal stamped in the corner. He opened it, tracing the thick black lines that marked property boundaries. The gate stood well within our ranch land. Looks like private property to me, he said flatly. And last I checked, HOA bylaws don't override state law. He snapped the map shut and stared Karen down. You made a false report. You wasted county resources. And you tried to weaponize my deputies against their own chief. Do you have any idea how serious that is? Karen stammered, her face twisting, her voice trembling. But the community. We voted. The board agreed. Daniels cut her off with a sharpness I'd only ever heard in courtrooms. Votes don't change deeds. Votes don't change law. And you don't get to call 911 to settle your fantasies. The officers shifted awkwardly, clearly furious at having been dragged into this circus. Elena remained at the gate, her arms crossed, unshaken, her authority radiating so fiercely that Karen's rants sounded like the tantrum of a spoiled child. And that was only the beginning. Karen's voice cracked as she tried again to claw her way back into control. This is harassment. You're all conspiring against me. I'll have your jobs for this. Sheriff. And you. She jabbed her clipboard toward Elena with trembling fury. You won't be chief for long once the state hears how you abused your badge to protect your husband squatting. Her words rattled off like stones thrown at a steel wall, bouncing back on her with no force at all. The sheriff's calm gaze didn't waver. Elena stepped forward at last, her voice calm, commanding, but now edged with iron. Karen, I've tolerated your meddling, your false letters, your harassment of my family and neighbors. But today, you crossed the line. You used 911 as a weapon. You tried to paint me as a criminal in front of my own deputies. That's not just ignorance. That's malicious intent. And I will not allow it to stand. Neighbors had begun to gather at the fence line, drawn by the flashing lights and the shouting. They whispered in clusters, eyes wide as the scene unfolded. For years, Karen had ruled over them with threats of fines, with letters typed in bold red ink, with humiliation at HOA meetings. She was the storm they all ducked from, the tyrant no one wanted to challenge. But now, here she was, exposed in the harsh light of authority, her power wilting in front of the very people she had bullied. The sheriff turned to the deputies. Write it up. False reporting, trespass, and harassment. And make sure this goes on record with the county attorney. One deputy nodded, pulling out his notepad, his pen scratching furiously as Karen gasped like a fish yanked from water. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. The community needs me. But no one came to her defense. Not one neighbor raised a voice in support. The illusion of her power had shattered. That night, the story spread like wildfire. Someone had recorded the entire confrontation on their phone, the flashing lights. Karen screaming. Elena standing calm in her uniform. The sheriff spelling out her lies. By morning it had gone viral in our town. And by evening it was on the local news. The anchor's voice was sharp with disapproval as they showed Karen's mugshot alongside her shrill accusations. HOA president arrested after calling 911 on police chief at Ranch Gate. At the next HOA meeting, the hall was packed. Karen tried to appear confident. Her hair sprayed stiff, her clipboard clutched tight, but she was drowning in her own sweat. When she started to speak, the room erupted. Homeowners shouted over her, demanding her resignation, waving copies of the county map, shouting about years of intimidation. You lied about the road. You wasted our dues. You almost got us sued. She slammed her clipboard against the table, shrieking for order. But it was over. The board voted her out on the spot, and cheers shook the room as her gavel, her symbol of authority, was stripped from her hand. But the fallout didn't stop there. The county's audit revealed what many suspected. Karen had padded invoices, funneled HOA dues into personal accounts, and billed residents for legal fees that never existed. The total misappropriated funds, nearly $500,000. When the Attorney General's office stepped in, it was no longer about a petty squabble over a gate. It was about fraud, extortion, and betrayal. The same neighbors she had once cowed into silence now lined up to testify against her. Her collapse was bitter. The once proud woman who strutted through the neighborhood with a clipboard and a smirk now shuffled into court in a wrinkled suit, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling. Her voice cracked when she tried to argue she had only been protecting the community. But no jury believed her. The verdict was swift, guilty on multiple counts. For us, life at the ranch finally returned to peace. Elena repaired the gate herself, installing a new sign carved into wood: "Respect the boundary. Respect the law." Neighbors stopped by often, some apologizing for not speaking sooner, others thanking her for standing firm. Kids waved at her patrol car when she drove by, proud that their chief had humbled the bully who once made their parents whisper in fear. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun sink into the hills, Elena leaned back in her chair, a rare smile tugging her lips. "Funny," she said. All it took to stop her was the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. I nodded, staring at the golden glow on the fields. The truth, and someone brave enough to say it out loud. Karen lost everything: her position, her reputation, her freedom. What she thought was power turned out to be nothing but paper, clipped together on a clipboard that could not withstand the weight of real law. And I ask you now, what would you have done if someone like Karen had turned the law into her personal weapon? Would you have stood silent to keep the peace? Or would you have fought back even when the risk was high? Share your thoughts. Because stories like this aren't just mine, they belong to anyone who's ever faced a bully and had to decide whether to bow or to rise.